Have you ever wondered why you keep returning to the same abyss? Why, even though you swear this time will be different, you end up, almost without realizing it, giving in to the same impulse, repeating the same pain, drinking the same poison. Have you ever looked in the mirror and, with teary eyes, thought, "What's wrong with me?" Well, listen carefully. There's nothing wrong with you. What's wrong is a painful truth, so deep and so ancient, that few have the courage to face it, but that you feel burning inside, begging to be heard. The truth is this: your addiction isn't just a mistake. It's not just a character flaw, a lack of willpower, a personal failure. Your addiction is a cry, a call from your subconscious, begging you to see what you've been avoiding your entire life. And perhaps that's why you're here now, listening to these words, with a heavy heart and cold hands. Because, deep down, you already know that there's no point in simply stopping. You need to understand why you started. Your soul isn't a machine that suddenly broke down. It's a living system, and when it suffers, it's because there's something inside you that's been forgotten, abandoned, rejected. That's why you can't simply get over it. Because the substance, the compulsion, the behavior, they're not the real problem. They're the response. A twisted, desperate, unconscious response. But an attempt, nonetheless, to fill the void. When you give in to addiction, you're not just running away from the pain. You're trying to rediscover something you've lost. A forgotten piece of who you are. Maybe it's the wounded child no one would listen to. Maybe it's the anger you were forced to swallow. Maybe it's the fear you masked to appear strong. All of this lives within you, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the moment to be seen. And until you look there, your soul will continue to cry out for help, even if it means hurting itself to do so. Make no mistake, you're not addicted to the substance. You're addicted to the relief, to the momentary silence of the inner critic, to the quick oblivion of shame, to the numbness that hides, even if only for a moment, the crushing weight of being yourself. You're not searching for the bottle, the drug, the distraction. You're searching for yourself. But no one ever taught you how to find that you, without getting lost along the way. That's why I say addiction isn't a weakness. It's a confused way of seeking the sacred. It's a blind ritual, unguided, meaningless, but still an attempt to transcend pain. And that's also why methods that attempt to simply remove the symptom fail. Because it's not enough to take the substance from your hand. You need to offer something real in its place. Something meaningful. Something that nourishes your soul, not just silences it. The wound that addiction protects doesn't go away just because you decide to be strong. It doesn't disappear because you try hard to ignore it. It only begins to heal when you stop running away and decide to listen to what it has to say. This is the part that hurts. Because it will ask you to face memories you'd rather forget. It will force you to see yourself without masks. It will place you before the abyss you've always tried to avoid. But it is in this abyss that your freedom lies. When you have the courage to go down there, something begins to change. You discover that the pain wasn't an enemy, but a messenger. That the emptiness wasn't a curse, but an invitation. That your shadow wasn't there to destroy you, but to remind you of who you are. Addiction only exists because you haven't yet allowed yourself to integrate all of this. And as long as you keep trying to silence these parts of yourself, they will continue to speak louder than you. Now you know, healing isn't perfection. It's wholeness. It's looking at everything you've hidden, the shame, the fear, the anger, the fragility, and saying, "I see you. And you're part of me too." From that moment on, the fight begins to lose strength. Because you're no longer fighting yourself. Of course, it will hurt. Of course, it will be difficult. But you've endured so much pain trying to avoid the truth. Why not use it to finally free yourself? Your soul doesn't want you to become immune to suffering. It wants you to be able to carry it without destroying yourself. So I tell you, stay. Don't run away. Listen to what your own darkness has to say. It knows the way back to you. And even if it hurts, even if it scares you, even if it seems impossible now, you will discover that you already had within you everything you needed to be free. Because the biggest lie you've been told is that you're broken. You never were. You're just incomplete. And that this process of becoming whole is the true miracle you deserve to experience. And now, take a deep breath. You are not alone. You never were. Welcome back to yourself. And perhaps now, after hearing this painful truth for the first time, you realize that everything you've experienced so far wasn't in vain. Every relapse, every silent dawn, every time you promised yourself never again and still came back. All of this wasn't just failure. It was language. It was your psyche trying, in the only way it knew how, to get your attention. You thought you were sabotaging yourself. But the truth is, you were just trying to survive. And this awareness already changes something inside you, doesn't it? Because if addiction isn't an enemy, but a messenger, that means you no longer need to treat it like a monster to be defeated. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to show you the parts of yourself that still cry in the dark. The ones you've pushed to the deepest corners of your unconscious, afraid they're too ugly to see. But what's ugly to your conscious mind is exactly what your soul wants to integrate. And I know, you might still be thinking, but how? How can I look at all this without sinking even deeper? And the answer is, one step at a time. One look at a time. One dive at a time, knowing that you won't disappear completely. Because there's something inside you bigger, vaster, older than your fear. Something that has sustained you this far. Something you can learn to trust again. This something is your ability to witness yourself. To become an observer of your own pain without immediately reacting to it. And this is a learning process that takes time, patience, and courage. But it's possible for everyone, including you. You've already proven it by coming this far, by being here with me now, listening to these words instead of seeking another outlet. You need to understand that what hurts most about addiction isn't the compulsion. It's the loneliness. The feeling of being misunderstood, judged, excluded. Therefore, hearing a voice that tells you, you are not broken, is already an immense relief for a soul so tired of fighting itself. This weariness you carry isn't laziness, it's not weakness. It's the sum total of years trying to be someone you never needed to be. And maybe, if you let it, you can slowly make room for something new. A little kindness toward yourself. A little compassion for who you were. A little curiosity about who you can still become. And this is where the true process of transformation begins. Because no one heals by hating themselves. No one heals by repeating the lies the world told them about their pain. You only begin to heal when you decide to truly see yourself. And truly seeing yourself isn't easy. It involves facing your memories, your shame, your wrong choices, and the injustices done to you. It involves realizing that much of what you call addiction wasn't a free choice, but a response to deep wounds no one ever helped you heal. I often say that the path out of addiction isn't a straight path. It's a spiral. You go back and forth, repeat patterns, fall and get back up. And with each turn of this spiral, you learn a little more about who you are. You discover another part of yourself that needed to be embraced. And one day you realize that the urge to hurt yourself is no longer as strong. That the voice that called you to the darkness is quieter. And that there's a new voice growing within you. This new voice is your true self. It's soft, yet firm. It says, I'm still here, and I'm not giving up on you. This voice is yours, and it's proof that you still have a choice. So, I invite you not to stop here, to keep walking with me, because there's still so much to discover about yourself. And I'll be here to always remind you of what you already know, even if you sometimes forget. You're not alone on this journey. So, if you feel like these words touched something deep inside you, consider subscribing here so you don't miss our next conversations. Each one is another step in this spiral that, little by little, leads you back to yourself. Because that's what you deserve, to return home. Return to yourself. Return to being whole. And even though the road still seems long, you've already started down it. That, in itself, is a victory. You're already heading in the right direction. And as you continue down this spiral, something unexpected begins to happen. You realize that, behind the fear, there is a silence. A deep silence, almost uncomfortable at first, but which gradually reveals itself as a space where the truth begins to reveal itself. You realize that, all your life, you weren't just running from pain, you were running from silence. Because in silence, you finally hear yourself. And we don't always like what we hear. It's in this silence that you begin to notice another dimension to your story. Until now, you believed that addiction was just a war between you and the substance, between you and the habit. But it's not. This war has always been between you and yourself. And, deep down, the substance was nothing more than a temporary truce. An improvised armistice to postpone an inevitable encounter, the encounter with your own shadows. And now you're here, before them. Without the noises of distraction, without the false anesthetics. Just you, and them. The memories that hurt. The guilt that weighs heavily. The unanswered questions. The wounds no one ever wanted to see. You may already know their names. Shame, rejection, abandonment, loneliness. Each one waits, patiently, for the moment when you finally stop running. And you begin to realize that these shadows aren't as threatening as they seemed from afar. They're not monsters, as you believed. They're versions of you who never had the chance to be heard, to be welcomed, to exist without fear. The child who cried in the dark, waiting for someone who never came. The teenager who learned to swallow his anger to avoid punishment. The adult who disguised his sadness with jokes to avoid being seen as weak. They're all here. And they don't want to punish you. They just want you to look at them and say, I see you. I feel you. I'm not going to turn my back on you anymore. It's at that moment that you understand why it was never enough to just stop drinking, stop smoking, stop binge eating, stop working yourself to exhaustion. Because none of that gets to the root of the problem. None of it gets to where the pain truly lies. The root is here, in the unconscious. A mysterious but not hostile territory. Full of symbols, dreams, memories, and also creative forces you don't even know about yet. Addiction was simply the unconscious's way of getting your attention. To force you to look within. And the more you look, the more you realize that behind all this lies a legitimate request. A request for self-love. A request to stop abandoning yourself every time things get tough. Because that's exactly what you were doing, abandoning yourself. And when you abandon yourself, it's inevitable that you seek refuge in something, even if that something slowly destroys you. Now you're learning that there is another way. A way that doesn't require you to fight yourself. That doesn't require you to pretend to be someone you're not. That doesn't require you to silence the parts of yourself that hurt the most. This path is made of small, conscious decisions. Of a new habit, perhaps strange at first, the habit of listening. Listening to what your anger is telling you instead of stifling it. Listening to what your sadness is asking for instead of ignoring it. Listening to what your loneliness is teaching you instead of hiding it under layers of immediate pleasure. And every time you listen, something changes. You feel the pain lessen a little. Not because it disappears, but because it's now shared with your consciousness. And what's shared with your consciousness loses its power to dominate you. Pain no longer needs to turn into addiction. It can simply be pain. And, over time, it can even transform into wisdom. This is how the unconscious works. First it screams, then it whispers. First it hurts, then it teaches. But to do so, you need to be willing to listen. And listening is hard, I know. Sometimes it hurts more than any withdrawal. Because listening means remembering, feeling, facing. And yet, this is the only way. Because there is no healing without listening. There is no liberation without encounter. There is no whole you without the parts you tried to leave behind. And here you are now, sitting with your shadows, for the first time without running away, without negotiating, without trying to be someone else. Just you, whole. And perhaps this is already the beginning of what you've always sought without knowing it. Peace. Not the artificial peace of numbness, but the real peace that arises when you stop being your own enemy. The journey continues. But you've already begun the most important road of all, the road back home. And home has always been within you. And as you sit before your own shadows, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. You realize that those parts of you, which for so long you considered undesirable, aren't just pain. They're not just open wounds or heavy memories. They also hold strengths you never imagined you possessed. You realize, little by little, that behind the shame lies sensitivity. That behind the anger lies a genuine desire for justice. That within the sadness lies love. A love so great that it hurt because it had nowhere to turn. And it's at this moment that you understand why you've never been able to forcefully rid yourself of them. Because they weren't meant to be uprooted. They were meant to be embraced. They're not the problem. They're the beginning of the solution. This is the silent, almost imperceptible, yet transformative shift. What once seemed like a battlefield begins to reveal itself as an abandoned garden. And you begin to realize there was always life there, it just needed careful watering. In this process, you also notice the patterns your mind has constructed to survive. The masks you wore to avoid being hurt. The lies you told yourself to avoid facing your feelings. You recall so many times when, even unintentionally, you smiled to hide your tears, helped to avoid rejection, kept quiet to avoid being judged. And you realize how each of these strategies cost a piece of you. But here, in the silence of this inner encounter, you no longer need to lie. Here you are seen, finally seen, by yourself. This honesty hurts, because for the first time, you realize that you, too, were the one perpetuating your own pain. That you chose to repeat destructive behaviors, that you distanced yourself from the people who could truly love you, that you preferred the false security of addiction to the risk of looking in the mirror. But with the pain comes something else. Freedom. Because from the moment you admit you've been hurting yourself, you also admit that you can choose something different. And that takes courage. Because now you can no longer fool yourself into thinking you're not responsible. You begin to understand that the same hand that hurt you can also heal you. That the same mind that sabotaged you can become your ally. That the same soul that pushed you into darkness can lead you back to the light. And with every small choice you make to stay present, to not give in to the urge to run away, you strengthen this new relationship with yourself. You begin to trust that you can endure what you feel without destroying yourself. You realize that pain, when faced, doesn't swallow you, it reveals you. You discover that there's much more to you than just your wounds. And that doesn't mean you'll never be afraid again. It doesn't mean you'll never slip up again. It just means you now know the way. And that way isn't forward or back, it's inward. That's where the key you've always sought outside lies. You begin to realize that everything you sought in addiction, relief, belonging, acceptance, love, already exists within you. You've just never been taught how to access it. You've never been taught how to be still enough to hear your own voice. And now, finally, you listen. You listen to the child you've always been asking for a hug. You listen to the angry teenager asking for understanding. You listen to the tired adult asking for rest. You listen to the human being you've always been asking to be whole. And as this listening deepens, you begin to dream differently. You dream of places you've never visited, but that feel like home. You dream of people you don't know, but who seem to recognize you. You dream of symbols, water, fire, doors, mirrors. All of them carry messages from the unconscious, reminding you that nothing is lost. Reminding you that every pain has meaning. And when you wake up from these dreams, something inside you feels less heavy. Because you begin to understand that there's nothing wrong with feeling what you feel. That feeling is human. That feeling is a gift. And that the sensitivity that once seemed like your weakness is actually your strength. You still don't know what tomorrow will bring. But for the first time in a long time, you're not afraid of it. Because you've finally understood that healing isn't in the destination, but in the journey. And that with every conscious step, every honest choice, every moment you choose to be present instead of running away, you're already healing. And if these words touched something within you, if you felt that forgotten garden within you begin to bloom, remember, this is proof that you are alive. And being alive is the greatest chance you have to transform yourself. If at any point you feel like it, mark that moment with a simple gesture. A click that tells yourself, I'm here. I recognize my path. Because even a small gesture can be a reminder that you're choosing to move on. Choosing not to give up on yourself. And that's already huge. As you walk deeper down this road back to yourself, a new challenge begins to unfold before your eyes. It's no longer the pain that scares you now, it's the emptiness that remains when it finally subsides. The emptiness that emerges when you stop running, when addiction no longer dictates every moment of your life. This silent, naked, and unanswered space can be as overwhelming as the relapses you so fear. Because, for the first time, there's no one to blame, no habits to hide your own loneliness. There's only you, and the questions that echo within you like a hollow temple. What will you do with this space? What will you build on these ruins you've finally decided to face? This is the question we all face when we choose to look within. What gives meaning to my existence, beyond the pain? And this is where many give up, not out of weakness, but because they haven't yet learned to see this emptiness as an invitation. You need to understand that this emptiness is not a punishment. It is not a mistake. It is not a reflection of something broken within you. It is the fertile soil where your new life can begin to grow. Because every birth requires first a free space, a dark womb, a silence that precedes words. This is the stage where you stop surviving just to avoid suffering and begin living in search of something greater. But it's also here that you'll discover that pain wasn't the only thing shaping who you were. You begin to realize how many little lies you've told yourself over the years. How you've constructed masks to please, to fit in, to avoid rejection. And now those masks begin to fall away, one by one. And beneath them, you find a face you might not immediately recognize. This face is your true self, not the person you had to be to survive, but the person you've always been, even when you didn't realize it. This discovery doesn't come without resistance. Because there's a part of you that still believes that being loved depends on pleasing. That being accepted depends on hiding. That being worthy depends on self-denial. This part will scream, it will kick, it will try to convince you that it's too dangerous to be who you truly are. But this same part, if listened to patiently, will reveal that all it ever wanted was to be accepted too. And so you begin to realize that the fight you believed you were fighting against the world, against the people who hurt you, against the substance that consumed you, was always against yourself. Against your refusal to be whole. And you realize, with a lump in your throat, that this refusal was born from the fear of not being loved if you showed your whole self. But the truth, though hard to swallow, is that you will never feel truly loved as long as you continue to hide who you are. At this point, you begin to remember that even the shadows you've rejected are part of your story. That every piece of you carries a truth, a lesson, a sign of life. That there is no light without shadow, just as there is no you without your flaws. And that maybe, just maybe, the people truly worth knowing aren't interested in your mask, but in who you are behind it. This is the hardest work anyone can do, to reconcile with all their parts. To look at each of them and say, I see you. I acknowledge you. I will no longer try to push you away. And so you begin, for the first time, to feel whole. Not perfect, not healed, not beyond the pain, just whole. And it is in this state of wholeness that you begin to understand the true meaning of freedom. Because freedom is not being free from problems. It is not never feeling the urge to run away again. It is not becoming unshakable. Freedom is being able to feel everything there is to feel without needing to hurt yourself any longer to endure it. Freedom is being able to choose consciously, even when the choice is difficult. Freedom is finally realizing that you are not a hostage to the past nor a slave to fear. From this point on, you begin to notice that life will no longer revolve around putting out internal fires. It will gain color, texture, meaning. Small details previously invisible will begin to shine before your eyes. Someone's sincere laugh, the touch of sunlight on your skin on any given morning, the sound of your own breathing as you lie peacefully at night. All of this was always there, but you couldn't see it, too busy trying to hide from yourself. Now you begin to understand that pain has never been your greatest enemy. The greatest enemy has always been self-abandonment. And now, by finally choosing to remain present, you not only transform your own life, but you also begin to inspire others around you without even realizing it. This emptiness that once seemed unbearable gradually becomes your greatest gift, because it's in it that the possibility of a new beginning is born. And you realize that each step on this journey is, in fact, a silent act of self-love. And self-love isn't about saying you deserve everything. It's about finally understanding that you deserve to be whole, because you already are, and always have been. And when you finally experience this sense of wholeness, even if only for brief moments, a new lesson insinuates itself, perhaps the hardest of all, accepting responsibility for your own life. Because now, without the veil of addiction to blame, without the mask to hide, without the past to justify every unconscious choice, you face the naked truth. No one but you can write what comes next. And this realization weighs heavily. No longer the pain of abandonment, no longer the hunger for anesthesia, but the inevitable weight of freedom. Because being free is also being responsible. For yourself. For the feelings you choose to cultivate. For the words you choose to speak. For the actions you put into the world. Being free is not just a relief, it's also a calling. An invitation to take control of your own journey, even knowing it will be fraught with uncertainty. It's at this point that many want to retreat. Because, paradoxically, the familiar pain of addiction seemed less frightening than the unfamiliar territory of choice. The pain was familiar, predictable. But the responsibility, it demands that you remain vigilant even when the temptation to escape presents itself. It demands that you look in the mirror without looking away, day after day. And then you begin to realize how often, even without realizing it, you still find yourself looking for excuses. Little traps your mind sets for itself. I'm this way because of what they did to me. It's not my fault, I just don't know how to be different. I can't because no one ever taught me. It's true that the wound wasn't your choice. But the healing always will be. It's not about romanticizing suffering or blaming yourself for the injustices you've suffered. It's about recognizing that you now have power over what you do with it all. That the scars are yours to bear, but they're also yours to reframe. That you can let them weigh you down forever, or you can transform them into strength. This transformation isn't immediate. It happens in small, daily acts. In every choice to be present, in every time you say no to the old voice inside you that tells you to give up. In every time you take a deep breath and respond to life calmly instead of reacting impulsively. In every night you lie down and know you did what you could that day, even if it wasn't perfect. And along this path, you begin to notice another side of pain. It doesn't disappear, but changes quality. It ceases to be an enemy and becomes a teacher. You begin to hear precious guidance from it, about who you were, about who you can still be, about where your soul yearns to go. Every painful memory, every shadow that still haunts you, every time relapse whispers, all of this becomes not a sentence, but a reminder. A reminder that you are here not just to survive, but to discover yourself. You understand that responsibility doesn't mean you have to carry the world on your shoulders, nor that you'll never stumble again, nor that you now have to become impeccable. No. Being responsible simply means stopping abandoning yourself. It's being present for yourself, even when everything seems to want to drag you back. It's holding your own hand in the dark and saying, I'll stay. I won't leave myself again. And little by little, you realize how this attitude changes everything. It changes the way you relate to others, because now you no longer need them to fill holes in you. It changes the way you face the future, because now you no longer fear it as before. It changes the way you look at yourself in the mirror, because now, despite all the scars, you can see someone worthy of respect looking back. This dignity isn't granted by anyone. It isn't validated by applause. It isn't earned through heroism. It arises silently when you decide to live life no longer as a victim, but as a protagonist. Not because everything has become easy, but because you've understood that there is no path more sacred than choosing yourself every day. You begin to glimpse a new kind of strength within yourself. Not the hardened kind that pretends it doesn't hurt, but a gentle, rooted strength that acknowledges its own fragility without letting it define you. A strength that isn't measured in visible victories, but in each time you fall and still decide to get back up. And suddenly, you realize, you're no longer the same person who once begged for relief in any bottle, in any distraction. You're no longer just that wounded child, that weary adult. You're someone who's learned to carry their own story with humility and courage. Someone who still feels fear, but no longer lets it decide everything for you. This is the seed of something even greater, emotional maturity. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That no longer needs to run away from itself. That no longer allows itself to be enslaved by old patterns. And that's when you finally realize, no one will come to rescue you. Because rescue was never outside. It was always an internal movement. And now you understand, not as a pretty idea, but as a lived truth, that life isn't waiting for a perfect version of you. It's just waiting for you to finally show up whole. And when you finally accept this responsibility for yourself, another realization begins to emerge, quiet but intense. You begin to see how your wounds intertwine with the wounds of the world. How your individual pain reflects a much greater collective pain. How each time you plunged into addiction to silence your feelings, you were, in fact, echoing the story of thousands who also carry this same weight, this same fear, this same emptiness. And then something profound surges through you, a sense of belonging. No longer that distorted belonging you sought in the wrong places, from the wrong people, from the wrong substances. But a silent, serene belonging that comes from the simple fact of being human. You finally understand that you are not alone. That each of us carries our own darkness. That each of us fights our own invisible battles. And this doesn't lessen your pain, but it does remove that sense of exile that always made it seem unbearable. You realize that your story, with all the mess, all the falls, and all the attempts to start over, is part of something bigger. That by healing yourself, even slowly, you also make room for others around you to heal. That by having the courage to look at your own shadows, you teach, even without realizing it, that it is possible to survive the darkness. And it's at this point that you begin to see compassion in a new light. Because you no longer judge others as much. You no longer rush anyone's steps. Because now you know how hard it can be to take the first step. How much it can hurt to let go of your own defenses. How impossible it can feel to keep breathing when everything inside you just wants to give up. You realize how before, when you were still down, you projected your pain onto others. How you blamed, how you attacked, how you felt victimized by everything and everyone. And now you understand that this was also a reflection of your own internal war. And so, little by little, you forgive. You forgive those who didn't know how to love you. You forgive those who hurt you out of ignorance. You forgive yourself for taking so long to see yourself. This ability to forgive doesn't come out of nowhere. It springs from the pain you finally decided to feel fully. Because only when you allow yourself to feel your own wound do you understand the other person's. And that transforms everything. You begin to see in others the same wounded child that once lived within you. You begin to hear in the harsh words of others the same fear that once screamed within you. You begin to perceive in the eyes of those still running away the same loneliness you once tried to drown. And when you realize this, a kind of tenderness is born within you, a calm strength that is unhurried, unangry, unproving. It's the awareness that we are all fragile and strong at the same time. That we are all learning to navigate this uncertain life. And perhaps, at that moment, you'll find yourself facing other people still trapped in their own addictions. People you love, people you barely know. And you'll feel an almost instinctive urge to save them. But now you know, it doesn't work that way. No one can walk this path for another. No one can cross their own shadows for another. The most you can do is be there. Show that it's possible. Be a silent example. Because when someone who's still in the dark sees you whole, even with scars, even still stumbling sometimes, that person feels hope. They feel like maybe they can do it too. That maybe they deserve to try too. And that's why, from now on, your story isn't just yours. It's a mirror for others. It's a map for others. It's a living reminder that pain isn't the end. It's the beginning of something bigger. And now I invite you to reflect. What have you learned about yourself along this journey? What truth emerged from the silence when you had the courage to listen? What part of you was rescued when you finally stopped running away? These questions aren't just for you to keep to yourself. When you dare to share what you've discovered, you help others find their own answers. You help others realize they're not alone. So I ask you, what was the most valuable lesson you learned amidst your own darkness? What shadow, when faced, taught you something you never imagined? Write, comment, put it into words. Because when you speak, you organize. When you write, you illuminate. And when you share, you become lighter and help someone who might need just that to take the next step. Your wounds tell a story the world needs to hear. Don't hide the light they bring. And when you finally muster the courage to share your story, something surprising happens. You realize you're not just helping others, you're helping yourself, too. Because every time you put into words what you've experienced, every time you give form to your pain and your overcoming, you lift a little more of the weight you've carried in silence. You return to the world a part of your shadow transformed into light. And that, in itself, is an act of healing. And it's at this stage that you begin to notice the subtle details of your new life. The way you breathe more deeply without even realizing it. The way your gaze rests on people, no longer with suspicion, but with curiosity. You realize you no longer need to be constantly on the defensive. That you no longer need to constantly justify yourself or prove anything to anyone. Because you finally trust who you're becoming. This confidence isn't arrogance. nor is it a certainty that you'll never fall again. It's calm, serene, like a root that sinks into the soil after a long storm. You know storms will come, because life doesn't stop being challenging just because you've decided to live consciously. But now you feel grounded enough to navigate them. You're no longer that leaf in the wind, tossed from side to side without control. You're the tree that sways but remains firm. And in this new state of presence, you also begin to notice how the relationships around you change. Some people who once accompanied you begin to distance themselves, not out of malice, but because they no longer speak the same language as you. Others, unexpectedly, come closer. People who recognize in you the courage you once overlooked. You understand that this is part of the process. That some connections break so that truer ones can flourish. You also begin to look at your family differently. Those who hurt you, those who loved you badly, those who didn't know how to care for you, they're still human. And as hard as it is to accept, you see that they also carry their own wounds, which they were never taught to heal. Maybe you're not ready to forgive everything, but you can already feel less hatred, less resentment. You can already feel a certain compassion, even if it still hurts. And the further you walk, the more you realize that the journey has no final destination. It's made of cycles, of falls and new beginnings, of discoveries and forgetfulness. You will stumble. You will be tempted to fall back into old habits. You will doubt yourself from time to time. But the difference now is that you're no longer completely lost. Because you can always return to this state of consciousness. You can always stop, breathe, and remember who you are. This memory isn't something anyone can take away from you. No matter how many times the world tries to convince you that you're worthless, no matter how many times that old inner voice still whispers lies in your ear, you know. You know it's not just what you suffered, nor just what you did wrong. You know there's something in you that always deserved love, even before you proved anything. And this is perhaps the greatest achievement of this journey. Looking at yourself and finally treating yourself with kindness. Because for so long you believed you needed to be hard on yourself to be strong. That you needed to punish yourself to avoid failing again. But now you understand that true strength comes from care, patience, and acceptance. You start talking to yourself more gently. Instead of saying, "You messed up again," you say, "I understand why you acted that way, but we can try again tomorrow." Instead of wallowing in shame, you breathe and remind yourself, every small attempt is a step forward. And that changes everything. Because no one can flourish in dry soil, under the constant weight of criticism. But when you offer yourself a little compassion, you create within yourself fertile ground to grow, to create, to love. And it's in this inner space that you begin to dream again. Not just dreaming in the literal sense, but also imagining possibilities for your life. Things that once seemed distant, impossible, unreal, now take shape. Maybe a new job, maybe a healthier relationship, maybe a trip, a project, a new way of serving the world. You begin to realize that you're here for much more than survival. This is the beginning of a new chapter, not free from difficulties, but full of meaning. Because now you no longer run from who you are. Now you no longer need to lose yourself in vices, distractions, or masks. Now you walk whole, even if slowly. Because now you understand, life doesn't demand perfection, it demands presence. And you've learned to offer that. And when you become aware of this new presence within yourself, you begin to realize how much it impacts the world around you, even without you consciously trying. There's something about someone who has stepped through their own shadows and decided to remain whole that transforms the energy of the places they pass through. You notice it in the details, in the way a stranger smiles back when you look them in the eye with sincerity, or in the way someone breathes deeper when they sit next to you, feeling, perhaps without knowing why, that they are safe there. This presence, this wholeness you carry now, isn't noisy. It's not made of speeches, nor of grand heroic gestures. It shows itself in silence. In the quiet firmness with which you say no when you would have previously given in for fear of disappointment. In the calmness with which you listen to someone in the throes of despair without trying to fix anything immediately. In the care with which you no longer abandon yourself just to save others. Because now you know that being whole doesn't mean carrying the world on your shoulders. It means being a beacon for those who are still lost, without, however, diving into the sea to sink with them. It means reaching out to those who want to escape the darkness, but not being dragged down by those who still choose to remain in it. You also begin to realize that not everyone will understand this new way of being. Some people will feel threatened by your peace. Others will accuse you of selfishness because they can no longer manipulate your guilt into doing what they want. But now you understand, it's not your obligation to convince anyone. Your only obligation is to be true to yourself. And, however painful it may be, you learn to let go of those who insist on remaining trapped in their own suffering, not out of a lack of love, but out of respect for you and for them. Along this path, you notice how life takes on nuances that previously went unnoticed. Because before, you lived numb, always busy escaping pain, always revolving around the emptiness that consumed you. But now you see colors you couldn't before. Small beauties. The light filtering through a window. The sound of rain at night. The smell of bread fresh from the oven. Simple things, but suddenly they have meaning, because you've learned to inhabit the present. And at the same time, you realize that the pain still exists. The shadows still exist. The memories still exist. But you are no longer defined by them. They are within you, but they are not you. You can feel them without drowning in them. You can remember without being consumed. You can even fail, stumble, and still remain whole, because now you know how to come back. Now you trust the way back. And little by little, this awareness takes root so deeply that it becomes second nature. You no longer need to constantly remind yourself who you want to be. You simply are. And even if others don't realize how hard it took to get here, you carry the silent dignity of someone who has known the depths of the abyss and chooses, every day, not to let yourself sink again. This choice is a daily one. It's never easy. It's never automatic. But it becomes easier as you get used to seeing yourself as you truly are, human, imperfect, but worthy. Always worthy. And then something even more profound happens. You begin to wish for others what you once wished for yourself. You begin to look at people not with pity or judgment, but with hope. Because if you could do it, why couldn't they? You begin to realize that no matter how hurt someone is now, there's always a spark inside, waiting to be rekindled. And this vision changes the way you relate to everything. You no longer seek the validation you once so desperately needed from anyone. You no longer try to fit in where you don't. You no longer allow yourself to be emptied to fit into others' expectations. Because you've understood that there's nothing more sacred than being whole, and no one can give that to you but yourself. It's in this silent wholeness that you begin to perceive a broader purpose emerging within you. Not a purpose imposed from outside, nor a mission that needs to be recognized by others, but a purpose born from the simple fact of being who you are, of being alive, of taking your place in the world with honesty and love. And then you realize that the journey was not in vain. That every pain, every mistake, every fall had a meaning. That the person you've become is made precisely of these glued together pieces, these integrated shadows, these moments when you chose not to give up. This is the moment when you look back and see not only the distance you've traveled, but also the beauty of the road. Because it didn't lead you to a perfect ending, but brought you back home. Inside yourself. To the truth you spent your entire life trying to find outside, and that was always here, waiting for you. And when you finally realize everything you've been through, everything you've endured, every shadow you've looked into your eyes without escaping, a deep gratitude begins to well up within you. Not just for having survived, but for having transformed every wound into ground, every fall into a path. It's almost as if you're a different person, but you're not. You haven't become someone different. You've simply peeled back the layers that hid who you've always been. This realization doesn't come with fanfare or fireworks. It comes gently, like a breath. And in that breath, you understand, every tear, every mistake, every vice, every struggle was necessary to get here. Not to destroy you, but to rebuild you. So that you could finally look in the mirror and recognize yourself with tenderness, without shame, without masks. And now, here, you breathe differently. It's as if the air has more weight, but also more perfume. As if silence is no longer a threat, but an invitation. As if life stops being a punishment and becomes a dance. A dance that's sometimes slow, sometimes chaotic, but always sincere. You understand that painful memories will still exist. That triggers will sometimes try to drag you back to the old pain. That the voice of doubt will still whisper in moments of exhaustion. But none of this matters as much as it used to. Because now you know how to respond. Now you know how to come back to yourself. And with this growing serenity, an even greater sense of responsibility also emerges. Because you understand that what you've discovered here isn't just for you. It's also for those who haven't gotten this far yet. For those who still stumble in the dark, believing there's no way out. For those who still believe their pain is greater than their life. And you know it's not true. That no one is destined to be just hurt, just addiction, just suffering. That we all carry a spark, even if hidden, even if stifled, just waiting for the chance to shine. That's why you wake up every day with a new purpose. Not the purpose of saving anyone, because that's everyone's job, but the purpose of existing as proof that it's possible. That even if you fall 1,000 times, you can choose to get up for the 1,001st time. And maybe that's why you're here now. Maybe that's why you made it this far. Because deep down, even when you no longer believed in yourself, there was still a small voice whispering that you deserved better. And that voice today is stronger. So I want you to know, I see you. I see the quiet courage you carried to keep walking even when no one applauded. I see the fear you faced, even while trembling. I see your will to live, even when it seemed pointless. And I want to remind you, it doesn't matter what happened before. What matters is what you do with it now. You hold in your hands something too precious to let slip away. The opportunity to transform your own pain into wisdom, your own struggle into hope, your own story into inspiration. And if at any point you doubt this, come back here. Reread it. Allow yourself to remember that you are not alone. That each of us carries our own journey, and that when we share, when we open up, when we have the courage to say out loud what was once bottled up inside, something changes. Something heals. Something shines. So, if these words touched you, even just a little, I invite you to not keep it to yourself. Write in the comments what you felt, what you discovered, what you'll take away from this. Because when you share, you don't just strengthen yourself, you also shine a light on someone still in the dark. And if this journey resonated with you, watch this video as if thanking yourself for getting this far. Because only you know how hard it was to take this step. And subscribe, because this is just the beginning of an even deeper journey. There's still so much to say, so much to explore, so many truths the world hides from us that we need to learn to see. You are privileged to have come this far. Not because I say so, but because few have the courage to truly look at themselves. Few have the courage to descend to the depths and bring back a piece of themselves. And you did. So look in the mirror tonight and recognize, you are not your pain. You are the person who survived it, who chose to transform, who didn't give up on themselves. And for that, for all of this, thank you for being here, for letting me talk to you, for letting me walk alongside you on this journey. May you never forget what you discovered today, because no one can take away the truth of who you are. Never again.